We'd like to welcome our viewers back to our special episodes of Islam in America, and we've been visiting Muslim businesses here in the Muslim communities here in America. And I think that now we're visiting the location of one of the more successful Muslim enterprises here in America, which is Universal Companies, which was founded by our brother Luqman, also known as Kenny Gamble. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Yeah. We're going to talk a bit about your business because that's a really very important story that Muslims should hear. But before we do that, I want to talk a bit about you and how you came to Islam.
Yeah, well, first of all, welcome to Philadelphia.
Thank you.
And my story is not uncommon to many other African Americans. How I came to Islam is through, I guess, starting out at a young age. My mother and my family were a very spiritual family, always in search of closeness to God, and that type of environment is what I grew up in. And during the, I would say the 60s, and there was a whole revolution here, a cultural revolution here in America amongst the African American community, and much of that cultural revolution was based on Islam and Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, which attracted, I mean, a lot of attention in our community. It was something brand new.
But what was the talk at that time about the Nation of Islam?
Well, the Nation of Islam basically was an organization, and it was a tremendous brotherhood that promoted and self-help and do for self. And being a conscious person, I looked at our communities and I looked at us as a people. And I thought that that was something that the African American community really needed to think about and to get involved in, is to help themselves and to be conscious of the environment around them, as it relates to economics, and as it relates to religion and politics and all of those other things that go along with it.
Just want to inject a little bit for our viewers who may not know Brother Luqman. He was also a very famous music producer here, and he was able to travel around this country and maybe visit and see a lot of the Afro-American communities in America. So I just want to get...
Well, I did travel extensively after being in the music industry, and I think that even makes me a little more sensitive to many of the things that was going on in the city, in the country, and in the world, as a matter of fact, as it relates to people, because most of my songs and the things that I was writing about, you know, you write about people and you write for people, so I was very sensitive to human affairs. And after seeing the African American community all over this country in such a devastating condition, that you try to find answers to that and find out, well, why?
Well, Brother Luqman, just for historical perspective, can you just give us a feel of what it was like to be an African American in the times you're speaking of?
Well, to me, in that time during the 60s, you know, I only can speak for myself. Basically, my whole focus was music, and that's what my desire was, is to be a musician and a producer and a composer. But in doing so, as I said a moment ago, that during that time you had all types of movements going. You had the Martin Luther King, you had Malcolm X, you had Elijah Muhammad. I mean, it was a revolution. There was a time in this country where African American people were not only fighting for their civil rights, but also it was a time when the government of America was being challenged by the African American community. There was tremendous economic moves made in this country. And so as a young man during that time, and after getting out of high school, and much of the historical aspects, you have to really look at the historical aspects of African American people, is that through the education system, they don't teach you much about the African experience here in America. And so when you get out of school, I learned more out of school about African American life than I did in school. Basically, school was void of any historical aspects of African American life. And so the question you asked, what was it like? It was like a light bulb almost going off in my head to find out that these conditions still existed in America, and that there were people in this country, men, women, organizations that have been fighting and organizing to try and level the playing field for African American people as it relates to politics, education, and also a different version, a different story about religion. And I had access to those things, and so it was a very gratifying time for myself to be able to have access to that information.
Well, Brother Lukman, let me ask you, now as we know it, this was the condition of African Americans at that time. Did that make them more predisposed to listen to the message of Islam?
Well, I think that the message of Islam had always been in this country. I mean, there were Moorish Americans, there were people of Arab descent, you know, people from all over, but no one really concentrated on the African American community to bring the message of Islam to African Americans. You know, so that's why I mentioned the Nation of Islam was a vehicle that came to the need of African American community. Do for self. And that whole philosophy of doing for self was basically a nationalistic kind of concept because of the condition that African American people were in. They were dependent on others because of education, because of the historical aspects of African American people in this country through slavery and whatever. That the community had become a dependent society, and it was time, and still time, for it to be independent. And I think Islam, the thought of Islam, brought in that independence consciousness to a group of people who were divided, that this showed some form of unity, the Nation of Islam as an organization. And one other thought on that, and as that seed of Islam was introduced into the community, that those seeds were the names of Allah, which I had never even heard of it before, the name of Muhammad, the Quran. These were the seeds that were dropped into the community, and when you look today, those seeds are being nurtured and they're growing into a strong Islamic community here.
So in terms of your career at that time, when you became Muslim, did you becoming Muslim affect your career at all?
Me becoming Muslim, it did not affect my career. It enhanced my career. It enhanced me as a human being. And so I think I grew tremendously at becoming Muslim, because anytime you educate yourself and you feed your spirit, then you automatically are in a position where you can be more useful to yourself and to society. So I think it helped me tremendously in my business, and personally as